Masculinity is under attack, not in a sudden, obvious way, but in a slow, deliberate, systematic dismantling of everything that made men who they were. Society doesn't want strong men anymore. It wants obedience.
It wants weakness. And it has spent decades making sure that's exactly what men become. The crisis of masculinity isn't a theory, it's reality. The destruction of traditional male roles, the demonization of masculine traits, the constant psychological conditioning, this is an engineered downfall. It's not an accident. It's not just a cultural shift. It's a war. And most men don't even realize they're the target. How did we get here? And more importantly, is there any way out? There was a time when being a man meant something. Strength, resilience, discipline, these were the foundations of masculinity. Men were the builders, the warriors, the leaders. They weren't just expected to be strong, they had to be. Civilization depended on it. Their hands shaped the world, their courage defended it, and their willpower drove humanity forward. But those days are slipping away. The 20th century marked the slow unraveling of these roles. Industrialization tore men from their homes, turning them into faceless workers, interchangeable parts in an economic machine that no longer cared for their strength or ambition. The sexual revolution reframed masculinity, branding it as oppressive, outdated, and problematic. Suddenly, the very qualities that built society were demonized. Postmodern ideologies now argue that masculinity is just a social construct, an idea that can be deconstructed, erased, rewritten. They want men to believe that strength is aggression, that leadership is dominance, that ambition is greed. Bit by bit, men have been conditioned to doubt themselves, to suppress their instincts, to step aside rather than step up. The modern world doesn't see men as protectors or providers. It sees them as a problem. And like any problem, the goal is to eliminate it. But the question is, will men allow themselves to be erased, or will they reclaim what was lost? Masculinity isn't just being erased, it's being actively attacked. From the moment a boy enters the world, he is bombarded with messaging designed to make him weak. Schools teach boys that their natural instincts, aggression, competitiveness, leadership, are wrong. The education system doesn't reward boldness, it rewards obedience. Boys who resist are punished, drugged, or labeled as problematic. They are told to be quiet, to blend in, to suppress any fire within them that could one day lead them to greatness. The more compliant they become, the more they are rewarded. The more they resist, the harder they are beaten down. And then there's the media. The relentless assault on masculinity is everywhere. In TV, movies, and advertisements, men are either weak, incompetent fools or aggressive, abusive villains. The heroic, strong, noble man has been erased from mainstream culture. Fathers are portrayed as clueless, husbands as useless, and leaders as tyrannical. The concept of toxic masculinity has been drilled into society's consciousness, convincing men that their very nature is something to be ashamed of. Boys grow up watching this and internalize the message. To be a man is to be a problem. It's social engineering. The more men suppress their nature, the weaker they become. And weak men are easy to manipulate. A society full of passive, confused men is a society that is easy to control. They will not fight back. They will not resist. They will willingly walk into their own cages, believing it is for the best. And by the time they realize what has been done to them, it will already be too late. This war on masculinity isn't just cultural, it's biological. Testosterone levels have been plummeting for decades. The food, the water, the environment, everything is designed to weaken men at a fundamental level. Endocrine disruptors, chemicals in plastics, artificial hormones in processed food, all of it works together to strip men of their strength. Lower testosterone means lower drive, lower aggression, lower confidence. It means men who are easier to break. But this isn't just about physical weakness. It's about control. When you drain a man of his energy, when you strip him of his will to fight, you don't need to suppress him. He will suppress himself. He will walk through life in a fog, incapable of pushing back, incapable of demanding more. He will be a shell of what he could have been, and he will never even realize it. The psychological consequences are even worse. Depression is skyrocketing among men. Suicide rates are at historic highs. Anxiety, loneliness, and a crisis of purpose define the modern male experience. The world tells men to be open, to be vulnerable, but when they do, they are ignored or ridiculed. It's a cruel trap. Be strong and be labeled toxic, or be vulnerable and be discarded. Either way, you lose. And if they try to escape, there's always a trap waiting. Social media, video games, pornography, each one carefully designed to keep men docile, distracted, and addicted. Every notification, every cheap dopamine hit, every late-night scroll is a chain, keeping men locked in a cycle of stagnation. They don't even see the bars of their cage. They think they are free, but they are more trapped than ever. A man without purpose is no man at all. And that's exactly the plan. The system doesn't want you strong. It doesn't want you aware. It doesn't want you hungry for more. It wants you subdued, silenced, and satisfied with mediocrity. The question is, how long will you let them win? Push men hard enough, and eventually, they push back. But the way they push back isn't always productive. The rise of movements like the Red Pill, MGTOW, men going their own way, and various online male communities is a direct response to the masculinity crisis. These groups are waking men up to the reality of their situation. They are teaching men to reclaim their strength, their confidence, their purpose. They expose the lies, the manipulation, and the traps designed to keep men weak. But there's a dark side. Anger, resentment, and extremism breed in these spaces. Some men take the message too far. The incel movement, men who have given up on women and society, has grown in the shadows, turning frustration into nihilism, nihilism into hate. Instead of reclaiming power, they let their bitterness consume them. They blame everyone else for their suffering and become victims of their own hopelessness. And that's the real danger. The system wants men divided. It wants them confused. It wants them so angry that they self-destruct. If men become reckless, if they turn to hatred instead of self-improvement, then the war on masculinity is already won. The risk is that, instead of rebuilding masculinity, these movements end up fueling the very destruction they were meant to fight. This is why leadership is crucial. Guidance is necessary. If men don't learn how to channel their frustration into strength, into resilience, into building themselves up, then they will fall into the same trap society has set for them. That's why this conversation is so important. That's why you need to stay aware. Subscribe now, because this fight is far from over. And if you want to stand a chance, you need to know the truth. Society does not want strong men. A man who has discipline, self-respect, and control over his own mind is a threat. That's why the world will do everything to keep you weak. It will distract you with meaningless entertainment, it will sedate you with constant indulgence, and it will convince you that the easiest path is the best path. But deep down, you already know the truth. The path of least resistance leads nowhere. It leads to mediocrity, to regret, to a life spent watching rather than doing. Reclaiming masculinity starts with rejecting the lies. Stop seeking validation from a system that wants you broken. The moment you stop caring about their approval, you become untouchable. Stop numbing yourself with distractions. Every hour spent on pointless scrolling, every moment wasted in mindless consumption, is another step further from who you could become. Develop your body. Strength is not just physical, it's a declaration that you refuse to be weak. Sharpen your mind. Read, learn, think for yourself. Take control of your life before someone else does it for you. Most importantly, men need each other. True brotherhood, not passive, shallow friendships, but real alliances built on trust, respect, and shared goals. Weak, isolated men are easy to manipulate. They are prey. But strong men, standing together, lifting each other up, challenging each other to be better, that is the foundation of real power. But this isn't a path for everyone. Most men will never wake up. Most will choose the easy route, the one that leads to comfort, sedation, and eventual irrelevance. They will spend their lives making excuses instead of making progress. They will blame everyone else instead of taking responsibility. And in the end, they will wonder where their time went, why they never truly lived, why they feel so empty. You have a choice. Be another statistic, or be something more. The masculinity crisis is not a temporary problem. It's not a trend that will pass. If anything, it's only getting worse. The forces that seek to weaken men are getting stronger, more sophisticated. The choice is simple: submit and fade away, or fight back. But this fight isn't against society, it's against yourself. The real war is internal. The world is testing men, pushing them, seeing who will break and who will rise. The weak will fall. The strong will survive. The question is, what kind of man do you want to be? Will you stand up and reclaim your strength, or will you continue down the path laid out for you, one of compliance and irrelevance? Let's hear your thoughts. What do you think is the biggest factor in the masculinity crisis? Who or what is responsible? Do you see a way out, or is it already too late? Drop a comment below and let's start the conversation.